Thanks everyone for joining, and for those who are watching the recording. Hope you're having a great morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we're really excited today to talk about solving the employee connection crisis with mentoring and ERGs. And we have a couple experts here with us today as well. To start us off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Sophie Williams. I'm Chronus's Director of Product Marketing, and I've been at Chronus for about 2 years, and I love to work with the product department as well as marketing to really join your feedback as customers and future customers to make sure that our product is meeting your needs, and again, just kind of rolling up to this big question, this big crisis of connection. Let's take a look at the agenda first. So in a moment, we'll do introductions, and then we're going to roll into what is the connection crisis and how bad is it. And then we'll talk about using connection as a strategy. And then we're going to shift gears into looking at mentoring and ERGs and how those types of programs can help solve connection and then roll up into improved engagement at your organization, and how software can help you scale and activate those. We'll also have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, we're going to address them then. You can also enter them into the Q&A tab in this webinar, or send messages in the messages tab. You can also, if you would like to chat, there's also a chat function in the webinar as well. So please keep it lively, ask questions, and we'll make sure we address them in that Q&A. Now I'm going to introduce our guests, and let's start with Jody here. So Jody has over 20 years of corporate experience and 5 years leading successful mentoring programs. She founded MentorStrat after developing and implementing strategies for a Fortune 50 mentoring program. Her achievements include securing a place on Diversity Inc.'s list of top companies for mentoring and being named Mentoring Champion of the Year by a leading mentor software partner in 2021. And we're going to hear from Jody in a moment with an icebreaker question. But before that, I'll introduce Wes. Wes is our Vice President of Product. He is focused on ensuring Chronus remains the preferred market and product leader for employee-driven development software. And this means building solutions that are simple, scalable, and inclusive. Wes has a keen eye for current workplace and human capital challenges and is intent on generating talent connection tools for leading enterprise organizations. Over the last 13 years, Wes has been a crucial leader in product strategy and product management for a number of HR tech companies, including ADP, Deloitte, and Apex HCM. But let's give them a chance to speak up a little bit with an icebreaker. So we're getting into summer, it's getting hot. I'd love to know what your summer jobs were growing up, either as a kid or a teenager, or maybe even in college. So Wes, we'll start with you. What was your summer job?
Yeah, sure thing. So my first summer job was actually really rewarding, but it was commercial landscaping. So, show up early in the morning, drive to, your client sites, and you had to mow, edge, and blow. And there's something to be said about kind of that mindless work and seeing the immediate results of your efforts, with a nice clean lawn. So a lot of memories of that, fun times, but many moons ago.
I love yard work. Well, great. Thanks, Wes. And Jody, what about you?
So my first summer job was at Mickey D's. I was working side by side with my sister there, who is a couple years older than me. So we got to spend a lot of time together, which was great because in our regular lives, we had very different interests. So we didn't spend a lot of time together other than, in high school, other than at work. So it was a good time for me. I actually continued that job all the way through college. And I went to school in the Chicago area. So I had an opportunity to work at the Rock and Roll McDonald's, if you guys have ever been to Chicago and been there. So that was a lot of fun. A good part-time job to have during school.
Nice, thanks, Jody. Yeah, right before this, we were talking about what it might be like to have someone in your household work McDonald's and they just come home smelling like fresh French fries. It can't be a bad thing.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks, Wes. Thanks, Jody, for being here. Before we jump into the content of the webinar, we want to spend a little bit of time talking about Chronus, introducing it to you if you aren't familiar with us. Chronus is the leading employee-driven development platform out there. We offer both mentoring and ERG management software. And our mission is to help enterprise organizations combat disengagement and the organizational connection crisis. That's really our call to action. And Wes, you know a thing or two about the connection crisis, so let's jump right into it. Maybe you could tell us a bit more.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Sophie. So let that sink in for a minute. 3 of 4 employees are disengaged globally. That's 75%. This is not something new. This isn't a new stat. Gallup does this annually with their employee engagement survey. And it's really frustrating to see that 75% of employees are disengaged globally. Again, not new, but just what does this really mean to us? What does this mean to us as employers? Fostering obviously relationships with our employees. We obviously want to reduce that. So what does that look like within our workplace? So here's a few examples. I think oftentimes we think about employee engagement, our minds immediately go to the line workers or the individual contributors of them not being engaged. But, it's not siloed to just individual contributors. And these examples, starting from the left, you've got a mid-level manager and he just feels isolated. He's on an island. He's working with his directs, but doesn't have any connection, with other managers and or leadership. Then in the middle, you've got a senior executive, which, she's an executive, but disengagement exists at that level as well. And she's lacking any kind of purpose in her work or any kind of motivation, to achieve the desired results. And lastly, there on the right, you've got a new hire who's just curious, what is my employer going to do to help drive development within my career? So that's just a few examples of how disengagement is laid out. I think if you look at those 3, that leaves 1 maybe that at the very least feels hopeful, connected, or engaged. And at worst, probably neutral about the organization and their work. But here's the thing. Disengagement isn't the cause, but rather it's the symptom of a greater issue. A lack of connection, whether it's with colleagues, with managers, from development opportunities within the organization. We know, especially over the last few years, whether hybrid or remote or the in-office shuffle, that's just really compounded the problem of employee disengagement. So here at Chronus, this is our clear call to action for us. How can we help our clients improve their employee engagement, helping them reach their highest outcomes? So we believe, and strongly are convicted, that organizations only reach their greatest potential when their people do. And again, to outline, it's their greatest potential. Sure, you can survive and you can do good enough, but in order to achieve the greatest potential of success for an organization, your people have to be equipped. And we believe through, in talking with our clients and others, talking with, others out in the market, clients are struggling with this, right? Even at Chronus, we've struggled with it. And we learned that employees are really asking for three key areas. So number 1, connection, purpose, which a little teaser, I'm going to talk about that a little later in the presentation. And then lastly, development opportunities. At this point, it's gotten so bad with employees, they don't just want these drivers, they need it. They absolutely need it. Along with that as well, and it transitions to this slide, as employee engagement begins to soar, so once you've got that engagement rolling, you'll start to see those business outcomes soaring. And that's what this slide is going to refer to. So when comparing engagement levels, Gallup takes the top quartile and the bottom quartile and compares the two. And these stats align with those 2 quartiles. So what you're seeing from a business outcome perspective, just a few stats here, 81% less absenteeism with the top quartile organizations that have high levels of employee engagement. 58% in patient safety incidents are reduced for those high level organizations. You can see in the top left, more profit. So it's not just about the employees and making them engaged. It leads to the business outcomes that we so desire. On the right-hand side as well, higher retention rates of employees. And it's not just employees. In that bottom right, customer loyalty is boosted in excess of 10%. So it's not just about, providing the engagement for employees. It matters to the business. You're going to get the outcomes you need if you're investing in these key areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like when engagement is reactivated in companies, when people want to be there doing their best work, this kind of magic happens. And I'm curious for those out there who this message resonates with, like, how are you seeing this at your organizations? Are you feeling disengagement, or are you seeing kind of this shift happen where you are seeing a trend towards engagement and then increased productivity and these great stats that Wes laid out? If you have any thoughts or experiences, please share them in the chat. But thank you, Wes. We're going to now transition into using connection as a strategy. So Wes mentioned that connection is one of the reasons, or lack of connections is one of the reasons that employees disengage. But we can use connection instead as a strategy to then boost engagement. And Jody's going to talk to us here about that.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. I think we absolutely can use connection as a strategy. And it starts with really deeply understanding your employees and what their development needs are. And it might look very different from what you expect, or if you've been in your industry for a long time, what you've experienced in the past. So if many of you might be able to relate to this, but my parents' age, and they're boomers, it was expected that you pick a company and then you just stay there your entire career. And I remember many conversations with my dad when I was a young professional and I was moving companies every few years, sometimes for more pay or a higher position, or even to try something new. He told me that's just not how it's done, that if you're loyal to a company, they will be loyal to you. And not only do we know now that that's simply not true in a lot of cases, but it's also true that the idea of like your chosen career or your chosen company being the main part of your identity, that's also changing. And with that change brings a lot of new challenges for organizations. So just like there's a difference between how my dad defined career success and how I did, I'm also finding that to be true with my own children as they're starting to navigate their own professional careers. So it's always an evolving process. When I was a young professional, becoming that people leader, it was the defined path. It was what everyone aspired to. But in today's world, it's important to realize that not everyone desires leadership roles, and people have different ideas about what success looks like. So some people are comfortable where they are. They just want to be successful in their role. They might have young families, they might have other things going on, or it's just, they're just comfortable being successful in the role. And we want to be able to help them do that. Other people might want to pivot their careers. And oftentimes when someone wants to pivot their career, they feel like the only way to do that is to change companies so they can kind of reinvent themselves. And of course, there are the people who still want to follow more of the traditional career advancement path into a leadership position. Another shift that's happening right now is that push for flexible work arrangements. So when we used to talk about stuff like work-life balance, we're now having to shift that conversation to talk about work-life integration and what do flexible arrangements look like. Couple that with the fact that there are currently 5 generations represented in the workforce, it becomes really important to embrace people where they're at and enable them to find their own path, pursue their own path. But we need to help them figure out how to envision a successful career at your organization, whatever success looks like to them. And if you can do that, if you can figure out how to do that, it makes them more supportive, feels more supported, engaged, more connected, and then want to retain at your organization. But that means that us as talent development professionals, and for us specifically in the mentoring and ERG space, we have to figure out how to shift to become more intentional and personalized while still dealing with a whole population of individuals within our organizations. All right, so Sorry, Sophie.
You're good.
All right. I just had a little lag on my screen. So, all right. So how do we do that? Thinking about how we can make our programs more personalized and intentional, but also at scale. If you look around in your businesses, you might find that you have many talent or inclusive community problems or goals, things that you want to solve with talent programs. If you can align your talent programs to organizational objectives, that's going to result in very real impacts to your organization, turning sort of your people development departments into profit centers, where in the past we've always been thought of as cost centers. But really helping drive that business forward. So think about questions like, are there skills that are critical to retain? Are there roles that are difficult to hire and that might shift over time? Think about your industry. What emerging technologies are coming in that are going to change the way that people work? Are there competencies that you want your leaders to have, but that maybe your leadership development program as it is today doesn't result in the leaders that you want? Or is that shifting? Does your leadership pipeline represent your organization as a whole? Do you support people who want to reinvent themselves or pivot their careers within your organization? So thinking through these very intentional questions can help you figure out how to strike that balance. Let me tell you a story about one healthcare organization that I was working with. They were having a difficult time hiring people to their organization that had nursing informatics degrees. So this is like the data analytics of nursing. As a response to that difficulty hiring, they offered to send their nurses the internal nurses to the organization back to school to get these degrees. So perfect. But they found that didn't solve the problem. In fact, many of the nurses who obtained their new degrees were leaving the organization after a period of time, making the problem worse. Now, not only did they not have nurse informaticists, but they also didn't have nurses. So it did make the problem worse. So we discovered, when we started to dig into the why, we discovered that these nurse informaticists were interviewing for internal roles, but they weren't getting them. So we started to kind of dig into why. We found out that it was because the organization didn't have support structures in place to help them pivot their career into their new roles. They didn't have any practical experience, and they didn't know how to talk about their new skills or their transferable skills. So they were essentially going into these data analytics interviews talking like nurses, right? Sharing their experience as nurses, and it wasn't getting them the roles. So what we did is we helped them create a mentoring program that paired these nursing informaticists with people who do have that data experience, data analysts, data scientists. And they helped not only helped the nurse informaticists find opportunities to gain practical experience, but also to learn how to do things like create skills forward resumes, prepare for interviews sort of in this new version of themselves. And what they found then was that, they were able to solve the problem, because instead of assuming that the nurses just wanted to take their new degree and run, and they looked beyond that surface level and they talked to the people to really understand what the problem is. This level of listening isn't always easy to do, though. So right now, the way that companies try to adapt to that rapidly changing environment and the disconnected workforce is through this giant misinterpreted, delayed, muffled game of telephone, right? Think about it, for those of you who don't know, telephone's that game you played when you were a kid where someone told you a message and then you repeated to the next person and so on until then the last person would kind of share what they heard. And as we know with that game, it's not reliable. But we are essentially playing telephone when we rely on the surface level information like company engagement surveys or word of mouth to figure out how to fix our low engagement problems. So how do we know what employees really want and need to feel connected and engaged? You have to ask them. We're going to explore this idea further and talk about how modern mentoring programs and ERGs can help you overcome those challenges and adapt and innovate faster to meet your employees' needs. I was working with a group of leaders, actually in the same healthcare organization. These leaders managed a group of clinicians. There were doctors, nurses, social workers, and pharmacists that all worked within their organization. So they invited me to a discussion where they were talking about a mentoring program that they wanted to create that would pair their clinicians across disciplines in mentoring relationships. Perfect. So I asked them what problem they're trying to solve with mentoring, because sort of that information leads you to figure out how to design the program. But they said that the employees, these clinicians, indicated on their annual engagement survey that they didn't feel connected. So when I asked them connected to whom, I got a variety of different answers, and some couldn't answer at all. So I encouraged them to go back and talk to these employees directly to find out what they meant by that they didn't feel connected. What they found out was that the clinicians didn't not feel connected to other disciplines. It was that they didn't feel connected to the rest of the business, right? So when we have to have a conversation with our employees that goes beyond that surface level game of telephone, we have to open a dialogue with them and then develop programs to meet their needs specifically. So in the case of the clinicians, without us fully understanding the problem, that team would have implemented a mentoring solution that would have actually made the problem worse, because it would have further isolated them from the business areas, right? So we went back and we actually created a program that crossed functions to help them feel more connected. So the writers for Harvard Business Review say that the key to future-proofing your organizations is to find out what tomorrow's stars want from you, so that you can know how to attract, develop, and retain them. And like I said before, that's always changing. So you have to keep your pulse on that.
Yeah, and it sounds like, sorry to interrupt, Jody, but it's like stop and don't stop at the surface. Like the example with the nurses, but really listen, ask those questions, what does success look like to that employee? And then it's not just about connecting them with anyone, it's finding the right connection to really drive or meet the goal that you're trying to. These are really great examples.
Yeah, it's sort of twofold. It's like you have to meet the organization's needs, and then you have to meet their needs as well. And so for us, it's just a tricky balance of trying to get down more past that surface level and get to that root cause. Because we know, and kind of going into the next piece, is that we know that programs like mentoring, like ERGs, can help, but you have to really understand that problem at more than just the surface level. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So when you think about mentoring, it used to be reserved for senior leadership. Executives would identify an employee that they wanted to mentor, and then they would take them under their wing. They would develop them in their own image so that they could retire and leave the company with someone who they had personally developed to take over the reins. But this approach essentially, it squeezes out the employees from underrepresented identity groups before they even have a chance to advance into the higher positions within their organization. So it's like when the mentorship is at that very top level, you're losing this opportunity to create more of a diverse team. When you think about modern mentoring strategies, that really goes beyond that traditional one-on-one, junior level employee paired with that senior executive. There's many types, right? There's many types of formats to leverage now, like group or rotational, peer or reverse mentoring for different causes. But many organizations are also using mentoring to solve the disconnected workforce problem. They're using it to create inclusive communities that are really rich in this diversity of not only thought, but experience, while still creating measurable impacts for their organization, right? So that's kind of the trick there. It's really brilliant because we know based on all their research, that companies that are committed to building diverse teams significantly outperform those that aren't. In a recent McKinsey Diversity Matters report, they show that companies committed to diversity are 39% more likely to outperform than those who are kind of in that lower quartile of diversity in their organization. So what does this all mean? It means that our approach to talent programs and how we support employees needs to change. So we have to be intentional in our approaches. We have to design integrated mentoring programs and ERGs that have a few things. They have constant engagement. They maintain ongoing support through regular check-ins, through continuous feedback loops. We need to ensure mentors are consistently available for individuals, that mentoring is available to everyone, that they're equipped with the skills to foster long-term relationships and trust. And then we need to develop ERG strategies that have regular opportunities for people to learn and connect for peer support. And this means like tapping into, I know you're probably thinking to yourself, like, I'm only a team of 5 or I'm just one person. But we really have to tap into the champions within our organization and sort of create this community of practice around mentorship and ERGs as well. The other thing is we need to design the programs that are really personalized. So tailor those programs to meet individual needs and goals, but also teach employees how to leverage their personal interests, their strengths, their career aspirations to create their own customized development plans, right? So it's not the organization kind of handing, everyone the same development plan and saying, like, here's how you define success, because it's not the same for every individual. So teaching them to create their own plans will help them feel more connected. And then, as I said before, everyone in your organization should have access to a mentoring program and an ERG where they can connect with others. They can connect with others in their identity group, or they can work on becoming allies for underrepresented employees as well. We need to design programs that are proactive while simultaneously being just in time. And this is thinking about mentoring, back to mentoring. So don't just create programs that are, you pair people together and then you let them go away from the visibility of the learning function without any guidance and support. And that's how, mentoring has operated in the past, but we know now that if you can anticipate challenges and provide guided conversations, tools, resources, and support before any issues arise in the relationships, that leads to better outcomes both for the individuals and for the organization. So build those things right into your programs, that support and guidance and tools. And then offer immediate assistance and resources to address any specific real-time obstacles and opportunities when you're developing programs. Think about those exceptions and how you're going to handle them. What happens if someone needs to drop out of a relationship for whatever reason? What happens if someone leaves the organization? What happens if someone isn't feeling psychologically safe in their mentoring relationship? So think about all those things when you're designing programs and come up with approaches and strategies to address those as you're in that design. And then having programs that are that have applied learning opportunities built right in. So encourage those relationships to find opportunities for the practical application of skills and knowledge. That could be through stretch opportunities, hands-on projects, real world scenarios. Some organizations have a gig program with special projects, but ERGs are actually a really wonderful place for employees to join, to build their skills, to demonstrate them to the organization in a non-traditional way. So leverage those as you're thinking about how people can have real life opportunities to apply their knowledge. And then have broad applicability. So design those programs to be relevant across various roles, various career stages, and it might be several different programs. I've worked with organizations that have 150 employees and they have 2 or 3 programs. I've worked with organizations that have 100,000 employees and they have 65 or 70 programs. So just think about it in terms of one size doesn't fit all with mentoring, and try to meet the needs at the various different career stages and roles. And then just make sure that the skills and insights that people are gaining and they're learning through those relationships, that they are also learning how to talk about them and talk about them as transferable skills, but that also they really understand how they can be valuable for them in a variety of different contexts. So if you think about just taking a couple of these key nuggets and a little bit of structure and advice into the programs that you're developing, you can improve the workplace not only today, but that will help you to foster this culture of continuous learning and support, building really a foundation that's going to pave the way for you to have more inclusive, skilled, connected, adaptive workforce that's going to help you meet those challenges of the future as well. So really building that foundation and culture of social learning from one another is going to help you grow into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Jody. You said a lot of really important things. One thing that really stuck out to me was how ERGs in particular can be these non-traditional paths to leadership or skill development. And it's something, and also in a byproduct of it is connection and belonging as well. So that's, I think that's very interesting. Next, we're going to switch over to Wes, who's going to talk about how a few of our customers have used software to activate connection at scale. And so Wes, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to walk through a couple customer vignettes here. And with these customers we're mentioning today, it's been critically important for Chronus to be there as a partner to assist them in tailoring the app around kind of their unique experiences, their cultures, and their form of employee connection. So Chronus provides obviously a highly configurable platform for both mentoring and ERG today that is suited to your unique needs of your organization. All right, first up, very recognizable brand there on the left-hand side, so Coca-Cola. And this is I'd say a rather traditional use case, or what we find commonly out there with organizations is, having a informal mentoring program in place. It's really a struggle to get it off the ground manually, to track it manually, to match. And it really is, obviously, as you can see there, one of the one of the issues they had was, mentors or mentees specifically were really too reliant on just their personal network and not having access beyond, their informal network and going beyond that. So when we sat down with them, obviously created a formal mentoring program to provide the opportunity for individualized and personalized. And what does that mean? People seek mentoring for different purposes. Of course, yeah, there's career development, but it might be specifically for, a number of different use cases. And what you'll find, and we'll get to the kind of the software equation in a second, we have an ultra configurable matching algorithm that really personalizes and tailors the matching for mentees and mentors so that they can get that personal connection that they need within a mentorship relationship. You can see the impact is rather great. So with Coca-Cola, you've got some impact statistics down there, but the bottom right, I want to call out 209 employee turnovers were avoided. In a November 2023 study of over 1,000 talent acquisition professionals, the average cost in lost productivity and rehiring costs climbed to over $36,000 per employee, or per lost employee. Applying this just to Coca-Cola, that's roughly $7.5 million in savings. So that is impactful to organizations. All right, so the software, where does the technology come in? So obviously, we really want to foster the right behaviors and then drive that conversation, the mentoring relationship to lead towards success. And there's a number of key steps, and we've invested quite heavily here in the past couple of years in the experience for our mentors and mentees to really drive the behaviors that are needed on their end to reach success within a mentoring relationship. Number one, it starts with matching, right? We have to provide that personable matching for mentees and mentors. And then getting that first meeting, I think we all know that's ever been in a mentoring relationship, whether mentor or mentee, that's a critical step towards getting a successful relationship off the ground. So doing what we can absolutely to get that mentor mentee to that first meeting, whether it's through electronic or through an email communication or through a nudge within the platform. We've really put a lot of time and effort there to make sure that we're driving that success for your mentoring programs. And then once we're there, it's got to be a structured conversation to drive the outcomes that we're looking to achieve within the mentoring relationship, obviously, which will tie to the business outcomes that you're looking for with the program as well. And that's where it leads to that last bullet point there. So the ROI, we have to understand the impact of these relationships, these programs. So whether this is integrating with your HRIS to evaluate employee retention or employee promotion trends, we have that capability. Or if it's benchmarking against other mentoring programs, of other corporations, we have to give you that insight to where you understand the impact of your organizations and the monetary savings or impact that you're making for the broader organization.
Yeah, Wes, can I just jump in here real quick?
Absolutely.
I think it's really important. Like when you think about that first meeting and getting that relationship off the ground is really important. And it doesn't always happen that way. And part of that reason is because in a mentee driven mentoring relationship, the power is reversed, right? The power dynamic is changed. And sometimes it can be very difficult for the mentee to take that first step. They feel like, they shouldn't be reaching out to this person or taking that first step. And so that's why I think it's really great that within the platform, you guys are really helping facilitate making sure that first meeting happens. And I think for program admins out there, you can think about, how can you address this within program launch events and training, and just make sure that those mentees know that, hey, those mentors are there to help you. So it is okay to reach out. But then also that mentors know, like, hey, if you haven't heard from them, it's okay to reach out and say hello and try to get that relationship off the ground. So I really love that you have that in the platform.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Jody. And to go off script for just a second as well, personal experience. So my most recent organization, I served as a mentor within our high potential program. And it was towards the end of the year, I was matched up with two mentees. Now we had a very manual kind of admin match program. There was no software. I can tell you over 2 months, the mentees and myself both tried to engage. We never got to our first meeting. So it never really got off the ground. Shame on me. But I think if there would have been some technology in place to track and to push, we probably would have got to that first meeting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I know before we switch into our other customer example, when we think about the product, we really think about those key milestones, right? Like making sure the product is what guides them towards that connection. So it's just more likely to happen, as something we're thinking about all the time. Okay. BCG.
All right. Boston Consulting Group. So real quick to frame up the challenge, you can see their facilitation of relationships that help participants navigate life at Boston Consulting Group while embracing their identities to increase feelings of inclusion. So what they went about doing is effectively creating pride networks for North America, EMEA, APAC, but as well as also having a global accessibility network for people that had lived experience of having a disability or being a caretaker, and lastly, also for allies as well. So you can see as they got that off the ground quite a bit. So, nearly 500 pride participants, across North America, EMEA, and APAC, along with nearly 900 accessibility participants, which is fantastic. Obviously, providing them a community to network, to have a voice, to share similar experiences that they have within their lives, whether outside of work or within work. All right, and this is obviously tied to the employee resource group or business resource group use case, but this is where technology steps in as well. So building a standardized experience for those groups, right? Create a place of inclusion where ERGs are open to everyone, to empower employees to connect, in a safe space. You can imagine too, from a leadership and management perspective, the ability to administer the program and have a central location to do so is critical for those leaders. It makes participation safe and easy. ERG product or technology with tools for privacy and usability increase connection and lead to a sense of belonging for these different individuals. What we've also found too, clients that are using ERG, there's also a desire once they have employees in these groups, there's a desire for mentorship, within ERGs. So they're looking for development, maybe not specific to the ERG use case, but they find, inclusive and connection within the ERG, which leads to mentoring. So there's a nice play between mentoring and ERG there. All right, so we started this off earlier. I mentioned this earlier. We believe organizations only reach their greatest potential when their people do. And that's what we're focused on doing. And the way we're doing that is through helping organizations create connected workplaces where employees thrive. Now, I've got some recognizable, brand logos down there, and just want to walk through kind of the different use cases that they're doing today. Jody had mentioned earlier some of the different mentoring use cases, if you will, or different types of mentoring, and they're using a variety of those. So I just wanted to hit on some of them. So first off, from the left to right, so we've got T-Mobile. They wanted to connect employees in ERGs. They also want a peer learning circle, so a group learning circle for people managers. And they also wanted to enable evolving skill strategies for their employees. At eBay, they have a pretty traditional one company-wide mentorship program, or it's one-on-one self-matching. Zendesk, they have one-on-one career mentoring program to support product engineering teams by providing opportunities for connection, career development, and enhanced satisfaction. They've also just rolled out a new high potential program, which is exciting to hear as well. At Autodesk, they have one-on-one mentoring enabled for their Autodeskers to develop skills and capabilities. They also have a group mentoring, which is one-to-many for employees to discuss career pathing within the organization. And lastly, have flash mentoring to achieve new possible in the ever-changing world. IBM, and this is exciting. So for HBCUs, they have a speed mentoring program with HBCU students to connect with an IBMer from a speed mentoring perspective. It's part of their pledge to train over 150,000 in the cybersecurity space over the next 3 years. And to wrap up, Albertsons, a very well-known large grocer, they have a one-on-one self-matching program for their ERG members across the entire company. They have roughly 7,500 ERG members in their corporate audience. And prior to introducing technology, they were able to match, a couple hundred people manually. But since the introduction of Chronus, they've expanded that to nearly 1,000 mentorship relationships. So obviously driving mentoring at scalability. And that's driven out of their Chief Talent and Inclusion Office.
Awesome. Thanks, Wes. And then this next part, right before we jump into Q&A, we have an exciting announcement that Wes is also going to share with y'all.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So again, hot off the press, like we launched this morning. Chronus announced the acquisition of Imperative. And to share a little bit more about what Imperative is, in a kind of a backstory, today, roughly 63% of employees want their employer to provide more opportunities for purpose within their day-to-day work. Yet there's what I'd call a purpose gap, right, that exists between upper management and those on the front lines. So what Imperative's platform does effectively is empowering employers to address this critical need for purpose activation, silo busting, and change management, leading to a more engaged workforce. So it's all about driving discovery of purpose for individual employees, and then incorporating and weaving that purpose into their work, effectively leading to more productive employees. Imperative's research-driven purpose assessment, and so it's an assessment where we determine where your purpose lies. We are actively building that today on the Chronus platform, and will be available to current Chronus customers in the next few months. And this will help facilitate, again, the purpose enhanced matching within mentoring as well. So we'll be able to match mentors, mentees based on their purpose style, which obviously will lead to some very fruitful conversations within their guided connection experience. So again, very excited to announce that, and you'll see a lot more coming from us here in the days and weeks to come.
Yep, very exciting over here at Cronus. We are somehow perfectly on time. So nice job, Wes and Jody, for keeping pace. Our last section is Q&A. But before we jump into that, I would love to invite y'all, if the imperative news is interesting to you, or just what we went through today, talking about using connection as a strategy and then scaling that strategy with software is interesting to y'all, I would really encourage you to click the Get Demo button that's right at the top right of your screen. And that's going to let us know that you'd like to learn more about the software, and we can set up a conversation. Okay, Q&A. So we've had quite a few questions come in through chat and some through the Q&A forum. This first one is really, there's more coming in. I'm going to open this one up to either Wes or Jody. I think either of y'all could answer this. But Osman asked, does Cronus have tried and true questions to ask mentors and mentees that you suggest using, especially if a company approaches you with a wrong approach or bad question? So it sounds like the scenario is maybe there's a method that isn't working or some questions that aren't working. How do we guide our organization to set up our mentors or mentees for success by giving them the right prompts or questions?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this one. And I say this a lot when people ask me questions about mentoring programs, but I always say it depends. So that's not a cop-out. It's actually the truth. When you think about mentoring programs, like across all the organizations that I've worked with, large and small, there's really three common things that I've found that help drive relationship success and program success for the organizations. The first one is to make sure that you're aligning the mentoring activities around your organizational objective. So the questions, to answer your question, the questions that you're asking and helping with the guided conversation may be different if it's a leadership development program, if it's a high potential talent program, if it's an inclusive community program. And so really thinking about what your goal and objective is, what you want people to learn and to be developing, and how you want them to be developing. So there's the personal piece of it, but then there's also the organization needs certain skills and competencies and individuals at their organization. And so trying to balance those can be helpful. The second thing is to support participants through structure built into the program, but also through training. And we know that relationships are more successful when both the mentors and mentees have training, not only in the program itself, but in the core skills that you need to be successful as a mentor or mentee. And the third one really is to ensure that you have designed that solution that's really custom to your organization. So when you think about those problems that you're trying to solve with mentoring, is that one program, is that multiple programs, and really thinking about it, designing it specific to your organization, and not just kind of thinking about it in an out of the box way. So, when I'm working with clients, I always spend the majority of my time with them in strategic conversations, discovery conversations, before we even start talking about whether the pairings are one-on-one, group, or any of the structures, or how long it's going to last. We really spend a lot of time making sure that we're aligned in that why, and prior to diving in.
Yeah, that's great, Jody, and everything Jody said. But in addition to on the technology side, taking that strategy that Jody and team are working with the organization on, and really cascading it down to the individual mentor relationship level to make sure everything is aligned. So as we've mentioned a few times, ultra configurable from a mentor-mentee relationship and what we call a connection plan. So really driving the behaviors and the setup that you need within a connection plan that is tailored, again, specifically to the use case of the mentoring program. Now, one thing I want to tease out as well, with the Imperative acquisition as well, we've acquired some technology to make it more of an interactive conversation. So we refer to it as a guided conversation, but a structured conversation between, one-on-one mentor mentee, again, whatever it's aligned to, whatever the conversation is aligned to. But, we've heard oftentimes from clients as well that mentors and mentees, they don't want to put a ton of preparation into that conversation. They want to show up and be guided through, what that relationship should look like. And that's something we are actively working on. Don't have a timeline for you just yet, but it's very exciting.
It's super exciting. And to address a concern that came up in chat from one of our existing customers, she asked what will happen to existing customers' profiles when we have to redo them? And the answer to that is no. It won't be disruptive. If you would like to take advantage in whatever that looks like of this acquisition and its technology, you'll have conversations with your customer success manager about how we can integrate it without being disruptive. So don't worry about that. And certainly more to come around what it's going to look like. Wes's team is very busy. I'll also mention that Lydia in the chat shared some links to good questions that can be asked in mentorship. So there's 2 resources there that you can go to and follow up to that last question that was asked. Great. Okay. Next question. What standards do you use in developing or enhancing programs? And then there is a follow-up to it. Have you adjusted the use standards for mentors, elements of effective practices for mentoring? That's a mentoring.org standard, it looks like. But I guess the overall question is, what standards do you use in developing or enhancing existing programs?
For me, I'll have to say that I don't typically work on youth programs. So there may be some different nuances there that I can't address specifically. But again, when I think about what standards we use for developing or enhancing programs, I use typically a 5-step process that really starts with helping you understand your goals, your objectives, your needs, who are your participants, and what are their specific needs. And that probably applies to that youth space as well. What are the specific needs of the youth in the mentoring relationships? And then we spend a lot of time there trying to understand that. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with wanting to be really individualized to make sure that you understand the specific population that you're trying to serve. All those questions and conversations happen before you move into design. But again, once you do design and implement a program, you need to make sure that you do have guidance and support and training and structure for both the mentors and mentees throughout that experience. In the youth space, I would assume that it would be more heavily focused on the mentor side, making sure that they understand the standards and kind of the rules of engagement for your programs. And then I always like to circle back to that tracking and measuring, right? So if you are designing a program that's that you say is going to help solve a problem or meet a specific goal or meet an objective, are you doing that? And are you able to show measurements in a way that can show that value back to the organization? That's going to help with everything from stakeholder support. Stakeholders love to talk in ROI and the dollars of the thing, right? So making sure that you're able to show that that return that your program is giving to your organization.
Thanks, Jody. Another question: how can companies ensure that mentoring and ERG initiatives are accessible and inclusive to all employees, including those from underrepresented groups?
You know what? Jody, you probably have a little bit more experience here, so I'll yield to you on this question as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So one of my passions and goals is I think mentoring should be accessible, I can't talk, to everyone, right? To everyone in your organization. That can become really difficult for non-exempt employees, people who are on phones, on the floor, working in some of those hourly type jobs, because they aren't often given the time away from their role to participate in personal development opportunities like mentoring or ERGs. And so it's really working with the stakeholders in those cases, and helping to make sure that you're designing programs that are designed in a flexible enough manner that you can have people participating from all across the board. I think from ERGs is really an interesting kind of more recent development, but really making sure that people understand that ERGs, if they're designed for a specific identity group or community, that they're open to both that community and the allies, that are also in your organization, and helping to structure those around providing not only opportunities to have conversation between identity groups and their allies, but also helping those allies develop advocacy skills that they can use when they're in their normal jobs within your organization. So just making sure that people know that they're invited, even though they're may not be part of a specific identity group, that they may be an ally, but that you're also helping to develop them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, inclusivity is hard to do manually. That's where software can really help with giving people access to these programs instead of it being kept. Just because it has to be run manually by somebody who has to invite new hires, etc. So yeah, software itself can be the key to inclusivity there too.
Yeah, for sure. And oftentimes, if you think about like ERGs, typically the leadership within an ERG, it's not their day job, right? They're volunteers that come and they're elected to lead these ERGs. And so being able to leverage software just from the whole like administration aspect as well, but also one centralized location to invite and engage with individuals, I think is really helpful in them being able to do more with the limited time that they often have for those, running the ERGs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Probably have time for one quick question, one more. And since we're talking about ERGs, I'll pick this one from the chat. So talk more about ERGs as a connection strategy. What's important to keep in mind when establishing ERGs at my company?
I think it's important to keep in mind that not only are like when you're creating events within your ERGs, that they offer some ability to have people connect on a one-on-one or a group setting basis, that they're not just, that you're not just having a lot of like town hall type meetings that everyone can just come and they listen to, and then there's no real opportunity to engage and interact. I think one of the main purposes around these ERGs, and that's why it goes so nicely with mentoring, and especially group mentoring, is that you can create smaller communities within that ERG to give people support, but to give them guidance that's specific to the group that ERG supports, but also just give them access to additional people within their organization. You're gonna meet people within your ERG that you never would meet in your day job, right? You just don't have access to everybody in that manner, and they're going to be usually centered around topics that people are passionate about, right? So there's some connection that can happen there as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And to dovetail into that as well, Jody, my experience at a previous employer, I served as a chapter, one of the chapter leaders for a military resource group. And just the leadership team that we had, I mean, we were from 4 different departments, 4 different levels within the organization. I was probably the most senior, but what we found is we were able to elevate, others that might have been maybe not recognized as a leader in a traditional sense. And we had them step up and really serve in the president, vice president role. And those are relationships that I established I never would have had. And I still do today, even though I've been gone from that company for, 8 years. So it really does impact the connection across the organization.
I love that example, Wes. And that's even helping, like, not only the connected piece, but it's also helping individuals who might not have opportunities to demonstrate certain skills to the organization, this like ability to show themselves as as leader, whether that's a leader of people or a leader of projects or culture or, you know, what have you in your organization. So I love that example. Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all. And thanks for everyone who's still here. We've wanted to say the fun doesn't stop with this webinar. You can certainly set up a conversation with a member of our team by clicking Get Demo. We also have 2 webinars coming up in June that are part of our Back to Basics series. The first is 5 steps to start a mentoring program, and later in the month, how to start an ERG program. So please check those out. You'll be getting a follow-up email with links to register to those. And then please connect with Wes and Jody on LinkedIn. If anything that they said today was interesting to you, they'd love to connect. Thanks everybody for attending. We'll see you in the next webinar, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.